Yeah, I'm Deidre Brock. I'm a spokesperson for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs down in Westminster, and I'll be the front bench spokesperson when the Fisheries Bill comes back to the Parliament, which we're expecting. We don't have a definite date yet, but we're expecting fairly shortly. I don't know whether people have had time to follow what's going on down in Westminster. I know you're very busy people, or indeed noticed the chaos that the place is descending into. I certainly don't blame anyone who's looking the other way for decency's sake, or anyone who feels like giving up on the whole thing as a joke in very poor taste. I have to say, the gung-ho mentality that has driven the UK, the whole of the UK to this point, a point where we are leaving the world's biggest single market with no idea, as Fergus has outlined, of the future trading arrangements, is frankly indicative of the way the whole place works down there. Someone gets an idea in their head, they start charging forward without thinking it through properly, gathering allies as they gather momentum before they come crashing down to reality at the end. And it's always someone else who picks up the tab for those damages, the taxpayer. The industry will be all too well aware of the impact of that lack of thought, the unintended consequences of ill-considered actions. Now, closing off access to skilled labour, we have touched on that, but this is something I want to talk about in some depth. In the case of Inshore Fisheries, of course, skilled crew. By ending the EU freedom of movement without ensuring other adequate supplies is vandalism. Now, there's much talk in the House of Commons about, from those in favour of a no-deal exit, about how people here will step up and take on those jobs. Now, I am not an expert, but I am going to hazard a guess that you cannot take a few school leavers and turn them into a deck crew in a couple of weeks. And you can't make a skipper out of it, just anyone. Now, I've not heard enough about Inshore Fisheries. I'm fairly new to this brief, so this is a really welcome opportunity for me to hear from you all and learn more about it. But what I have heard is that skippers are calling it, some skippers are calling it a day long before they would have expected to, and some stories of skippers cutting back on crew. Now those indications to me suggest an industry in need of a bit of help in some way or another, and I am keen, as I hope you can see all of my colleagues are, to hear what might be done to help. Now, Brendan's mentioned the Northern Ireland situation, and as Fergus has said, this Brexit agreement that the UK government has reached with the EU currently is also likely to leave Scottish fishing fleets and crews still under the control of the CFP, but with no way to influence it. I hope we're wrong. I'd be delighted to be proved wrong on that issue. But as Fergus said, access to the European markets is very likely to be tied up with compliance with the CFP rules, and also that the UK is not in a strong enough position to negotiate anything approaching the kind of arrangement that, say, Norway has. And we will still lose market access to the more than 250 countries that we can trade with as EU members, unless the UK government can strike deals with them between now and the end of transition. Now, this industry, again, as I think Fergus made very clear, is a lot more important to Scotland's economy than it is to the UK's. And I fear it is down the pecking order for special consideration by the UK government when those trade negotiations start after we leave. We'll be doing everything we can as MPs to push it up the list. Obviously, the Scottish government will be as well. But it is not going to be a scoosh by any means. And of course, Fergus has already filled us in on how the Scottish government see that challenge and the chances of improving those prospects. But if I can just return to the access to skilled crew for a moment. That £30,000 wage threshold that the UK government is talking about imposing certainly might seem to be a sensible threshold down in London and the southeast of England for skilled workers. But the average Scottish wage is lower than that, and it will not serve any part of our economy well. And we've seen some minor concessions for seasonal workers for agriculture, but that is a tiny drop in the ocean compared to what that industry actually needs. And I think, frankly, we are going to be looking at a long-term campaign of taking industry's needs, different industries' needs, to the UK government and asking for concession after concession, almost a campaign of attrition to sort of wear them down, unless we can get changes to the proposed immigration rules. There is a carrot being offered of the temporary measure for lower skilled workers, but that will hardly seem attractive to foreign workers when it is a single year allowed for a fee, with a prohibition on the following year and no prospect of switching to any other scheme. So it seems hardly likely to replace workers who come here to work. And you have noted too, I'm sure, the news from yesterday, I think it was, that the Scottish Chambers of Commerce and the FSB Scotland issued a joint statement calling for a fundamental rethink of the UK's immigration rules in regard to Scotland. And I know the Cabinet Secretary for External Affairs will be making a statement on the economic impact of the proposed changes to the immigration rules from the UK government today, so look out for that. Now, can we train people here? Yes, of course we can, but access to the industry isn't all that easy. I think Fergus touched on this, but there was an article in the Herald recently by Simon Collins that pointed out the problems in getting funding from the banks for new vessels, without which the industry is unlikely to grow at any great rate, and the chances of persuading people into training for a career that faces those difficulties are diminished as a result. Now, I did think that when I read that, I did think there might be some case to be made for perhaps a specialised fishing version of the Scottish Investment Bank to not only manage the monies that come from the replacements, whatever those are, for the Maritime and Fisheries Fund, but from the UK government, but to leverage in other funding from private and commercial sources. I don't know what the Scottish government plans are, though, so I'm sure there's possibly something better up Fergus's magic sleeve, so I better not step too far out of the line on that one. But the challenges that all of Scotland is about to face will be pretty substantial, but the challenges that an industry that relies on its product getting to market very quickly to maintain its condition are even larger. Onshore infrastructure will have to be addressed. I don't think, although I believe there are moves afoot on this, that there's commercial cargo refrigeration at most of Scotland's airports, for example, and quayside operations will have to be reviewed for investment too. The bigger problem, though, will be the customs checks that will have to be observed because of Brexit. There are hardly any inspection posts set up for fish and seafood in France, for example. So if we don't get a decent trade agreement from the talks during the transition period, exports will be put under threat, frankly. And given the track record of the UK government in negotiations over Brexit, no one is particularly confident at the moment, and we could be looking at tariffs as well. So none of that would be good news for this sector. The Scottish Government has a significant workload ahead of it addressing these issues coming down the track and others, and I and my fellow MPs will have a ton of work down the road to try and get some movement on them as well. So please, we need you to keep telling us what you need and what would help, and we need to keep hearing what needs changed. I know you'll be talking to Fergus and his officials a lot, and that your focus has to be here, but certainly I'd appreciate a wee helping hand for us too down in Westminster. If we can help each other, we will be we will hopefully get through this in better shape all round, and I'm certainly looking forward very much to speaking to you today and to working more closely with you in the future. Thank you very much to Sifa and to Elaine and everyone else for organising this today. It's a great opportunity. Thank you.